It is 4:45 in the morning on March 13, 1993, in Keaton Beach, Florida. 12-year-old Spiridon Ibajer is sound asleep in his ground-level bedroom. What wakes him isn't the howling wind or freezing rain. It is the sound of the ocean bursting through his walls. A 12-foot wall of Gulf water pours directly into his room. Spiridon and his family are suddenly jumping with each surge, dunking themselves underwater just to stay warm. The ambient air temperature is dropping so fast that the seawater actually feels warmer than the air in their own house. This is a winter storm producing a hurricane-level storm surge. But the most terrifying part of this localized nightmare is that it wasn't a surprise. This flooding was a single data point in a massive, perfectly predicted weather event that somehow caught half the continent completely off guard. 5 days earlier, meteorologists at the National Meteorological Center in Maryland were staring at their screens with growing alarm. Lead forecaster Dr. Louis Acacellani was tracking a pattern that refused to behave like a normal winter storm. This diagram shows the Arctic, polar, and subtropical jet streams on a crash course, colliding over the incredibly warm Gulf of Mexico. The result was bombogenesis, a rapid, explosive strengthening. The central pressure plummeted to 975 millibars, the atmospheric pressure of a Category 3 hurricane. The National Weather Service nailed the prediction. By March 10th, warnings were blasted across 26 different states. Several governors declared states of emergency before a single snowflake even hit the ground. This brings us to a grim question. If meteorologists delivered the most accurate, widely communicated 5-day forecast in the agency's history, why did it result in 318 deaths and total national paralysis? The models mapped out an anomaly so vast, it actually fractured into 4 distinct disasters simultaneously. It was a hurricane in Florida, a blizzard in the Appalachians, a nor'easter along the Carolina coast, and a maritime nightmare producing 100-foot rogue waves out at sea. The communication gap started right at the source. The National Weather Service lacked a single warning category for a multi-hazard threat of this scale. They were forced to chop the event up, issuing a fragmented patchwork of localized alerts. Those fragmented alerts triggered a fatal cognitive bias. When coastal residents in Florida heard winter storm warning, their brains naturally pictured snow and freezing rain. They had absolutely no mental category for a winter storm producing a catastrophic ocean surge. The meteorology was flawless, but perfect data fails if the institutional vocabulary used to share it triggers the exact wrong psychological response in the public. Beyond psychology, there was a physical reality America was about to face. The built environment itself was designed for a climate that was actively vanishing, starting in the Deep South. Cities like Birmingham and Atlanta had zero infrastructure for clearing snow. They had no salt trucks, no plows, and no building codes requiring roofs to handle heavy snow loads. When 17 inches fell on Alabama, roofs caved in, and thousands of vehicles were simply abandoned on highways, completely paralyzing the region. Down on the Florida coast, the failure took a different shape. Because storm surge was historically categorized strictly as a hurricane problem, generations of coastal homes were built flat on the ground level rather than elevated on stilts. Then came the secondary failures. Coastal power grids were battered by heavy snow and then immediately coated in conductive salt spray blown in from the surge. As soon as crews managed to repair a line, the salt residue shorted out massive sections all over again. Infrastructure is engineered for historical assumptions. When an event shatters those assumptions, 5 days of advanced warning cannot alter a city's physical vulnerability. You cannot rebuild thousands of miles of power lines in a week. The final toll reflected that physical vulnerability. 318 people died across the eastern seaboard, 10 million lost power, and the economic damage reached $5.5 billion. The transportation sector suffered a total logistical collapse. For the first time in history, every major East Coast airport was forced to shut down simultaneously. The aftermath forced immediate reactive changes. In places like Taylor County, Florida, building codes were aggressively rewritten to mandate stilts for all new coastal homes. At the federal level, the National Weather Service revamped their communication protocols to better describe multi-hazard threats. It took a massive loss of human life to force local governments and federal agencies to align their physical engineering and public messaging with actual meteorological reality. But whether we actually absorbed that lesson is still up for debate. When Winter Storm Uri hit Texas in 2021, the power grid collapsed in almost the exact same way, proving that vast stretches of southern infrastructure remain critically vulnerable. There is a stark divide between prediction, what our science can foresee, and protection, what our society is actually built to withstand. We can possess the most advanced, highly accurate forecasting models in the world, but if our power grids, our building codes, and our emergency vocabularies are trapped in the past, perfect science will not save us.